Danger can emerge from unexpected areas in the wide and unpredictable ocean. The Robertson family's idyllic sailing holiday turned into a nightmare when they were ambushed by a pod of killer whales, leaving them trapped and struggling for their lives. But as they strived to survive, they realized that the onslaught was not a random act of nature, but rather something more evil. Follow their perilous quest as they find the truth in the battle, the obstacles to return home alive. Newspapers were exploding with alarming tales at the start of the fall of 1973. A family of 4 was discovered in the middle of the Pacific Ocean after more than 5 weeks of difficult survival. A group of killer whales sank the family ship, turning their fantasy into a horror. Dougal Robertson, 47, was not a daring explorer from the pages of adventure novels in 1971. He worked as a dairy farmer, but he used to love the sea when he was younger. He studied at Leith Nautical College in Scotland before joining the British Merchant Navy. He was an excellent sailor, sailing the southern oceans until he met Lynn, his future wife. He gave up the sea for his family, but the sea never left him. Dougal and Lynn settled in Staffordshire at Meadows Farm. Unfortunately, the farm was not financially stable. They had 4 children and couldn't even afford new shoes, let alone a proper education. When they couldn't pay their electric bills, Dougal realized they were in big trouble, and he saw no way to make things right for his loved ones. One of his younger sons asked him why they couldn't take a trip across the world. The naive inquiry seemed to be the only justification Dougal Robertson ever needed. Soon after, the farm was sold, and the family's entire life savings were spent on the Lucette, a 43-foot-long schooner. Dougal Robertson was 2 years older than the boat. Except for Dougal, no one in the family had any sailing experience. Douglas, his older son, recalls that they didn't have even practice in the calm seas of Falmouth before leaving on January 27, 1971. It was undoubtedly a good idea, but Dougal was eager to get away from the poverty of their old property. The first thing they encountered on their voyage was a storm which nearly ended their adventure. This was a terrifying gale, the kind that turns the entire sea white with froth, with waves up to 40 feet, 12 meters high, and punishing gusts of up to 63 miles per hour. In such conditions, a team of experienced sailors on much larger vessels may struggle to stay afloat. But by some miracle, the Robertsons survived. Douglas, 18, played the role of muscles on this journey. He was performing all the duties that a ship's crew would ordinarily perform. His relationship with his father was already comparable to that of a captain and a subordinate. Dougal was sometimes too harsh on his son, but that all changed one day. When they were sailing to Jamaica after crossing the Atlantic, a huge wind gust turned the sails boom and slammed Dougal in the head. He nearly went overboard, but Douglas was faster. He grabbed his father's feet and hauled him back on board. Dougal never allowed himself to be as harsh towards his son again after Douglas saved his life. Crossing the Atlantic aboard a small schooner requires some basic knowledge, but nothing could have prepared them for a killer whale attack. Mostly because they hardly ever attack ships. All those myths of killer whales tracking down individuals for vengeance or pure bloodthirstiness are simply that, stories. Their name is also a mistake. They're not whales but dolphins, albeit the largest of their kind. The Orcas' status as unrivaled sea predators. They hunt in packs called pods, which can be larger than 40 orcas, 11 tons and 33 feet long each. They're frequently seen hunting large whales with this level of effectiveness. Douglas Robertson remembers thinking to himself that they'd be devoured alive, but that wasn't the case. Perhaps the Lucette's speed and size matched those of a whale, prompting the Orcas to attack the ship. This idea is backed by the fact that the Orcas did not assault the ship. They vanished as soon as they realized Lucette was not as tasty as it looked. But the damage was done. It was enough to sink the schooner. They were more than 200 miles from the nearest land, the Galapagos Islands. Lucette was down in a flash. The Robertsons had little time to fully escape and acquire anything that could help them live. Lynn was still wearing her nightgown when they leaped into Lucette's inflatable life raft. All they had was a dinghy, 10 days of fresh water, and not much food. A bag of onions, oranges, and some candies. They were too distant from land or any shipping route for anyone to come to their aid. Dougal had to inform his loved ones that they were unlikely to survive. However, the best ideas are frequently created in the most desperate circumstances. Douglas heard from his father that certain areas of the Pacific near the equator are known as the doldrums. Although it rains in these areas, the sea's calm. They had no choice but to sail here. They built a sail, attached it to the dinghy, Ednam Air, and used it as a tugboat for their raft. They quickly learned how to grab massive sea turtles with their bare hands. However, sea turtles are known for their vicious claws. They are tenacious creatures that will not give up without a struggle. Sores and wounds from those encounters do not mix well with salty ocean water. Fortunately, Lynn was a registered nurse. She realized that the turtles may help with a variety of issues at once. The Robertsons learned to drink turtle blood, which they said was practically terrible, but anything that could keep them alive was good enough. Their only source of medicine was turtle fat. It looked to be beneficial to the various sea sores. They sighted a ship on the 7th day of their fight and used one of their flares, but they were utterly overlooked, so no one noticed them. 3 days later, it became clear that the opportunity to wake up every morning would only be earned if they fought for their lives. The inflatable life raft also has a hole, which was probably caused by the turtles. Douglas tried everything he could to reinflate the raft, but it was pointless. There was no way to fix it. They all had to transfer to the 9-foot dinghy. Nonetheless, Douglas's idea worked. They gathered enough water in the Pacific's doldrums to stay hydrated, but the dinghy was, to say the least, unstable. The 5 individuals within the vessel were constantly submerged in water, except for the 6th, which was allowed to sit on the only dry spot. They worked in turns, and Lynn frequently skipped her shifts to allow her children to sit there. Rains were a godsend, but they also created a problem because water had to be scooped out on a regular basis. They had forgotten what a good night's sleep felt like at this point. Turtle blood was mingling with water in the dinghy, and when this mixture poured overboard, it attracted sharks. They were more of an intimidation than a true threat to the Robertsons, but they served as a wonderful reminder to them to be tough. They even caught and ate one. According to Douglas, the shark had another fish in its stomach, which provided a significantly greater food source than the shark itself. On the 23rd day, a particularly enraged turtle nearly put an end to this saga. It used its keen claws to sever all of the Robertsons' bottles of fresh water. This might be fatal because no matter how much fresh rainfall was on the dinghy's bottom, it was already tainted with turtle blood and other potential food wastes. Lynn forbade them from drinking the water since she knew it was potentially harmful. Instead, she had an unappealing but smart notion. She kept everyone hydrated by doing impromptu enemas with this water. Toxic compounds could not enter the bloodstream in this manner. On the 38th day after the sinking of the Lucette, Robertson's dinghy was seen by the Takamaru II, a small Japanese fishing boat. They couldn't believe they'd find anyone alive aboard the boat, but the Robertsons had made it. Their tongues were swollen from thirst, making it difficult for them to talk. They were exhausted and dizzy, but they were eventually saved. Dougal Robertson published a book on these events, which became a bestseller. Soon after, he purchased a new property for his wife, but they chose to part ways. Dougal got a boat again, started sailing in the Mediterranean, and hasn't stopped since. The family's drive to survive was what had saved them. Thank you.